most widely sold oil filter in America passes 5% of harmful particles straight through to your engine bearings on every single circulation cycle, and most drivers have no idea because it looks identical to a premium filter from the outside. This happens with way more brands than you think. So we're counting down the 5 filters that are destroying engines and the 5 that really earn their keep. Filter number 1 to avoid, DriveWorks. This is the budget store brand filter built specifically to meet the absolute minimum OEM standard at the lowest possible manufacturing cost. The canister uses lighter gauge steel than premium competitors, which is why cold start pressure spikes and high RPM acceleration can stress it in ways a thicker can wouldn't notice. The filter media is conventional cellulose only, which loads up with debris faster than synthetic blend alternatives and reaches bypass capacity sooner, meaning unfiltered oil begins circulating before most drivers even think about an oil change. The anti-drainback valve, the flap inside the filter that keeps oil from draining back into the pan when the engine shuts off, uses nitrile rubber that hardens under repeated heat cycles. When it stiffens and fails to seal, every cold start runs the engine on dry bearings for several seconds while oil pressure rebuilds from scratch. Filter number 2, Fram ExtraGuard. International Organization for Standardization Testing places the ExtraGuard at 95% filtration efficiency at 20 microns, the lowest published efficiency among major filter brands. That means 5 in every 100 harmful particles at that size pass straight through to the engine on every circulation cycle. The construction tells you why. The filter element historically used fiberboard end caps rather than metal, and community teardown databases going back more than 20 years document cases of the media collapsing under oil pressure, blocking the oil passage to the cylinder head entirely. One case documented by the Mini Mopar oil filters revealed teardown database showed a collapsed Fram media element that caused oil starvation severe enough to warp the head and melt vacuum lines. The bypass valve, the safety mechanism that opens when the media clogs so oil keeps flowing, uses a lightweight stamped component that mechanics have documented sticking open and allowing continuous circulation of unfiltered oil. Filter number 3, STP. The canister walls aren't noticeably thinner than competitors, documented to flex under hand pressure and vulnerable to puncture from road debris on bottom mount filter applications common on many sedans and trucks. Superforms users documented the STP anti-drainback valve failing to hold pressure at startup, producing half-second engine knock on roughly 1 in 5 cold starts, which is the sound of cam lobes and bearings running without oil until pressure builds. The gasket material hardens after heat soaking, and multiple Yodatech mechanics reported STP filters leaking or loosening during the service interval, which is the kind of problem that shows up as a low oil warning light at highway speed. Think of it this way: a $3 filter that develops an oil leak puts a $5,000 engine at risk from oil starvation, and the driver never sees it coming until the temperature gauge starts climbing. Filter number 4, Purolator Classic. What earned this filter the community nickname Terrolator was a documented pattern of filter media tearing at the base of pleats, particularly near the metal seam crimp where pleat spacing is widest under oil flow pressure. The tears create bypass paths where unfiltered oil circulates directly to engine surfaces. Users on forums documented 4 separate tears in a single Purolator filter after only 5,000 miles. The pattern appeared across multiple product lines simultaneously in 2014 and continued appearing in newer production runs as recently as 2020. The most dangerous detail is that a torn filter gives the engine no warning signal. Oil pressure reads normal, the engine runs normally, and the filter quietly lets abrasive particles reach every bearing and cam surface for the full duration of the oil change interval. Purolator eventually rebranded its lines, but the media quality pattern followed the new names. The mechanism behind the tearing is straightforward. Cellulose media is wood pulp fiber held together with adhesive binders, and when oil flow pressure pushes unevenly across inconsistently spaced pleats, the weakest glue points give first. A synthetic media pleat held together by interlocked fibers rather than adhesive doesn't fail that way, which is exactly why every filter on the recommended list uses synthetic or synthetic blend media instead. Filter number 5, Pennzoil oil filters. Multiple teardown confirmations across US production runs establish that Pennzoil oil filters are manufactured by the same company as Fram and share identical internal construction with the ExtraGuard. Fiberboard end caps, the same bypass valve, the same cellulose-only media, and the same 95% efficiency sealing. The Pennzoil motor oil brand earns genuine trust, and that trust transfers to the filter on the shelf next to it, but the filter itself is the same construction that earned the ExtraGuard its reputation. What makes this entry distinct is the supply chain inconsistency. A Canadian teardown documented a Pennzoil filter with steel end caps and silicone anti-drainback valve, indicating different manufacturing sources for different markets. US buyers get the Fram identical construction, while Canadian buyers may get a different product with the same label. There's no way to know which construction is inside the can without opening it. Those are the 5 to skip. The next 5 are the ones that actually work, and the first one has been quietly earning a reputation for reliability at a price most drivers never expect to pay for quality. Filter number 1 to use: Wix. Wix runs a blended media combining cellulose fibers with synthetic material, which increases both filtration efficiency and contaminant holding capacity compared to cellulose-only alternatives. Greater capacity means the filter reaches its bypass threshold later in the service interval, so the engine runs on filtered oil for more of the miles between changes. The XP line is engineered specifically for synthetic oils, high operating temperatures, and towing loads, which are the conditions where filter media faces the highest stress. Construction includes metal end caps, a strong center tube, and consistent pleat spacing, and drivers who cut W-Wix filters open report the uniformity that prevents media from collapsing under pressure. Many W-Wix models use silicone for the anti-drainback valve rather than nitrile, maintaining flexibility across temperature extremes instead of hardening with heat cycles. The silicone valve holds oil in the filter at shutdown, so on the next cold start, oil reaches engine surfaces seconds faster than a filter with a failed nitrile valve. Drivers who've run Wix for hundreds of thousands of miles consistently report no filter-related failures, which is the most practical validation any construction claim can get. Reliable construction across a long-proven record. The next filter pushes the protection interval beyond what most drivers think a filter can sustain. Filter number 2, Mobil 1 Extended Performance. Mobil 1 publishes a burst strength rating of 615 pounds per square inch for its extended performance canister, which is roughly 9 times typical operating oil pressure and among the highest documented burst ratings in the consumer filter market. The synthetic blend media achieves over 99% filtration efficiency per Society of Automotive Engineers testing, and the stated contaminant holding capacity runs to 28 grams, which Mobil 1 documents as double the capacity of leading conventional filters. Doubling capacity means the filter holds twice the debris before the bypass valve activates and unfiltered oil begins circulating. The anti-drainback valve uses silicone. The gasket is engineered to remain flexible across the full 20,000-mile rated service interval, and the metal end caps and spiral metal center tube prevent media collapse under cold start pressure spikes. At $10 to $14, it's $6 to $10 more than a budget filter, which is roughly what a single professional diagnostic scan costs just to walk through a shop door. Filter number 3, AmSoil EA. AmSoil sources its full synthetic nanofiber media from Donaldson, a major industrial filtration manufacturer. The media is resin-free, which matters because resin binders in conventional cellulose media degrade in hot oil over time, eventually compromising the filter's structural integrity from the inside out. AmSoil publishes 99% efficiency at 20 microns and 98.7% efficiency at 15 microns. At 15 microns, the particle size range is most destructive to engine bearings because it matches the thickness of the oil film protecting those surfaces. Competitive cellulose filters document efficiency as low as 40 to 51%. Independent particle count testing on a Toyota Sequoia showed particles larger than 4 microns, dropping from 1,817 per milliliter with the OEM filter to 128 per milliliter with the AmSoil EA, a reduction that translated to a measurable drop in the cleanliness classification of the oil system. The filter is warranted for 25,000 miles, the longest guaranteed interval in the consumer market. HNBR gaskets, silicone anti-drainback valve, wire screen backing on the media pleat, and fully tucked double seams cover every construction point where budget filters document failures. Filter number 4, K&N Performance Gold. K&N builds the Performance Gold with resin-impregnated synthetic blend, media rated for particles down to 10 microns, and flow rates of 12 to 16 gallons per minute. Among the highest in the market, the heavy-duty canister exceeds 550 psi, hydrostatic burst strength. Metal end caps eliminate the fiberboard construction failure documented in budget filters, and a 1-inch welded hex nut allows removal with a standard wrench, rather than a filter-specific tool. Where most oil filter comparisons focus purely on filtration efficiency, the K&N design specifically optimizes the balance between filtration and flow rate, preventing the filter from going into bypass mode during high-demand conditions such as cold starts, turbocharger operation, and high RPM acceleration when instantaneous oil demand spikes. Motor Trend's 2021 Engine Masters multi-brand comparison named the K&N Performance Gold the best performing filter for the combination of flow capability and filtration efficiency at 10 microns. K&N operates an in-house filtration test laboratory built in consultation with Southwest Research Institute. At $10 to $14, it delivers race-proven construction without requiring a performance build to justify the purchase. built for demand. The last filter on the Protect list closes with the best capacity to efficiency combination available in the consumer market. Filter number 5, Bosch Distance Plus. Bosch publishes a contaminant holding capacity of 29.1 grams for the Distance Plus, the highest documented capacity among widely available consumer oil filters, compared to 7.4 grams for economy filters. At 4 times the capacity, the Distance Plus reaches its bypass threshold far later in the service interval, meaning filtered oil reaches engine surfaces for more of every oil change. The canister uses 0.020-inch heavy gauge steel, rated at double the burst strength of competing filters, and the steel base plate is rated at 500 pounds per square inch. The gasket uses PTFE, which is Teflon-based material, rather than standard nitrile rubber. PTFE maintains its seal and flexibility across temperature extremes in a way that the nitrile gaskets documented to harden and leak in STP and other budget filters physically can't. A full metal bypass valve, silicone anti-drain back valve, and rugged metal spiral wound center tube complete a construction list that directly addresses every documented failure mode of every budget filter on the avoid list. Bosch claims 99.9% efficiency, one of the highest published ratings in the market, combined with that 29.1 gram capacity. At $8 to $12, the Distance Plus is sometimes the same price as a Fram Extra Guard at the same parts counter. The construction isn't remotely comparable, and on a vehicle the owner plans to keep past 150,000 miles. Paying the same price for the better filter is one of the simplest maintenance decisions available. What the capacity number actually means in practice is worth spending a moment on, because 29.1 grams versus 7.4 grams sounds abstract until you translate it into engine time. An economy filter filling at 7.4 grams of capacity at a typical contamination rate can reach bypass activation well before the end of a 5,000-mile oil change interval on a high-mileage engine or in dusty driving conditions, which means the bypass valve opens and unfiltered oil begins circulating while the owner still has thousands of miles left before the next scheduled service. The Distance Plus at 29.1 grams maintains filtered flow throughout that same interval and well beyond it, which is why Bosch rates the filter for extended service rather than the standard 3,000 to 5,000 mile economy filter window. On a direct injection engine like the ones found in the 2018 and newer Accord, Camry, or F-150 with the EcoBoost, where intake valve carbon buildup is already a documented long-term problem, keeping oil contamination levels lower for longer helps slow the rate at which combustion byproducts accumulate on internal surfaces. The filter isn't the only factor in that equation, but it's the one most drivers swap out without thinking twice about the construction. The PTFE gasket is also worth a separate mention because it changes the installation experience in a way drivers notice immediately. Standard nitrile rubber gaskets require a thin coat of fresh oil applied to the sealing surface before the filter goes on, and even then they can stick to the engine block during removal, sometimes tearing or deforming in a way that leaves fragments on the seating surface and creates a leak path for the next filter. PTFE doesn't stick. It threads on smoothly, seats with uniform pressure, and releases cleanly at the next change without the seized rubber frustration that ruins a Saturday morning oil change on a Tacoma or a Silverado. That's a practical advantage that no efficiency rating captures, and it's the kind of detail Bosch carries over from its industrial filtration work into the consumer product line. So now you know the 5 commonly bought oil filter brands to second guess before buying, and the 5 that will actually protect your engine. Tell me in the comments what filter you've been running and whether any of the teardown details on the 5 to avoid match what you've seen on your own oil changes. Subscribe if you want to keep getting the parts and maintenance information the Quick Lube Counter doesn't post on the wall. Thanks for watching and see you next time.